How's it going? It's looking good. I'm pretty excited here. How are y'all feeling? Man, I can't express to everybody how stoked I'm about this opportunity that we have right now. I mean, Jesus Christ, 4 years has gone by so fast. I'm remembering watching the Iowa caucuses, in the 2016 election cycle, and not really knowing what to expect, having a lot of hope, but also a feeling of wondering what's going to come next if this movement has the viability. And Jesus Christ, we are in such a different situation right now. The energy is huge. People are really showing up for Bernie. This movement has just grown at such an exciting and fast pace, and I cannot express enough how thrilled I am at this opportunity, and the fact that it's looking like we're going to do really well tonight. It's looking like these early states we're going to do phenomenal in. I can't wait. We'll just wait a couple seconds for a few more people to show up before we really get into it. But I hope everyone is out there as excited as I am. We're absolutely in a really historic moment right now. I mean, Jesus, I remember when I first became like a socialist when I was around 18, and sort of thinking it was going to have to be something that I had to keep sort of secret, right? It wasn't something that was very popular that you could come out to most people, most strangers, and say, well, I'm a socialist. And now we literally have one of the front runners in the Democratic Party is a democratic socialist. We're winning elections across the country, and we have this movement that doesn't seem like it's going to let up, and it's continuing to grow. So welcome to the stream. Just a quick couple things. If you can, please hit us up with the super chat. YouTube makes it very difficult for us to operate. They're always demonetizing our videos. We're obviously not going to get any big corporate sponsors for what we're doing. This is all funded by us, the people. We'll talk about this a little bit later on the show, but over the next few months and this next year, we're really looking to expand the work that we're doing. We already put out so much content, but we're really trying to make this into a global platform so that we're able to be in contact with people from across the world and really build this left-wing revolution that we so desperately need, because it's not going to happen just in one country. Absolutely, it's going to need people from the United States, the UK, Brazil, Uruguay. We are absolutely fighting against a force that is so powerful and so entrenched. The only way that we're going to be able to beat it is with people across the world fighting against neoliberalism and capitalism, really changing the system. So please, if you can, support the show, hit us up with a super chat. I'm going to take you all through a little bit of this evening as we're sort of waiting for the results to come in from the caucuses tonight. Be sure at 9 o'clock to catch Michael. He's going to be on the Hill with Crystal Ball. That's going to be a really amazing thing. And, let's do this. I'm so pumped right now. I really hope that you guys are as pumped as I am. So we've seen today in some of the early results, some of the earlier caucuses that have happened, resounding victories for Bernie Sanders. It's looking phenomenal for him. It's looking phenomenal for this movement. And it's because we're doing something that really hasn't been done in the United States in generations, pushing back against an establishment that has betrayed the working class, betrayed the American people, and also has been an agent of chaos and destruction around the world. And we're not going to let them do that anymore. We are going to fight back, and we're going to break through capitalist realism, which is this horrible feeling that people have felt for so long, that nothing's possible, that there's nothing that can change, and the only thing we can do is harm reduction. Well, we're not doing harm reduction anymore. We're building something that's really going to change people's lives. So, as we're coming into this moment right now, we really should be enthusiastic, looking to build as much as possible, and coming forward with our message. Because here's the fact: is the Bernie Sanders movement, the Bernie Sanders message is unbeatable. No one else, who's running against Bernie in the Democratic primary, and obviously no one on the Republican side, is able to galvanize as much support. And, we had Bree on our last show on Friday, and she said something that I thought was so true. It's like, for a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, this is so much more than just preferring one candidate or another. This is actually about an existential threat that most people feel. People are afraid of getting sick. People can't afford their rent. People can't get by on the horrible wages that they've been getting from the bosses. People are pushing back against this, neoliberal order that has just devastated not just the United States, but the entire globe. And this is a really exciting thing to be a part of. And we need to just continue to set our sights higher, right? We can't settle. We actually have to not only win the presidency, we need to win Congress. We need to take down a system of government, an economic system that has devastated, absolutely devastated people across the globe. So what we're seeing right now in Iowa is people who you might not even expect to, like, the way that we've been taught, especially people who like study political science or whatever, is that the average American is very conservative and they don't want to do anything, and they just want to sit back and they just want, to tweak a little bit with the tax rates. They want to, they don't want anything too radical. They don't want to stand up for women's rights to choose. They don't want to create a country and a society that's open to people from around the world. That's what we've been told for so long, and all those people are being proven wrong, and it's because y'all are doing it. It's because we are doing it together. So, just real quick again, as people are coming in, please hit us up with a super chat. We really need that as we're continuing to grow. There's so many people working on the show behind the scenes too, that we need to make sure that we're able to support and continue to grow. But yeah, so, let's take a moment to really appreciate where we are in this movement. As I said, I think we all remember, it's a moment probably we'll never forget, what it was like when Donald Trump became the president of the United States. It was probably one of the most frightening moments that I've had in my lifetime, other than the devastation of the economic crisis in 2008, that not only were things not getting better, things can actually get much, much worse. And that's something that we need to remember as we're doing these, the politics that we're doing, is that it's not just trying to, survive. It's literally an existential threat. The rise of the far right has been devastating in the United States. It's been horrific in Europe and in Brazil. And then obviously you've been seeing what's happened in Bolivia, where there's been this horrible racist coup that has devastated so many social gains. This is not something that's just going to go away. We're not going to be able to return to normalcy, right? We need to not only fight the far right, but we need to fight the people who have been creating the conditions that allow the far right to thrive. And that is centrist politicians, that is neoliberal politics, and fundamentally is capitalism. But at the same time, in this past 4 years, as all these horrible things have been happening, people have been coming together. The rise of the DSA has been so exciting. Think about this for a second, that not only are we here right now waiting for results to come in Iowa, potentially with a big victory for Bernie Sanders in this movement, across the country, we have left-wing, progressive, and very many democratic socialist people running and looking likely to be able to take power in this next cycle. It just goes to show you how quickly things can change, and it should give everybody hope that continuing to plug in and doing the work that we've been doing is going to pay off. So that's something that we really need to hold on to as we fight against this establishment that has a lot of power. It doesn't have people power, but it has a lot of money, has a lot of influence in the media, and it has the ability, to shut down, these very popular movements. Going on, I can't imagine if any of y'all have been seeing CNN today. There's a lot of fear. The New York Times, for example, this op-ed recently come out. It's like, oh my God, what if Bernie Sanders actually wins the nomination? How devastating and damaging will that be? Well, obviously we realize that that's BS and nonsense, but at the same time, it should also show us that they're scared and they have information that they know that this movement is happening and they have to derail it. Look at the way that they attack Bernie. It's never about the policies, because Medicare for all is popular. Fighting for a higher minimum wage for people is very popular. Fighting against climate change, literally like the end of the planet as we know it, is something that's very popular. Americans realize that something has to change, and we need to stand up and do it. Just real quick, I want to say thank you so much to Alex Butler. Solidarity, I assume you're from the UK. I love this connection that we've been able to build between the United States and the UK, sharing strategies, working together. That's exactly the kind of connections that we need to be building. Thank you so much, Damien, for sure. These next 5 weeks, this is 4 years we've been prepping for this moment, and it's here. It's just like the excitement should, you should really be feeling it throughout yourself. And not only are we here and we have the opportunity to win, but it's looking very, very good. And thanks again, Sarah. Sure. No, let's make sure the audio is good. So, what we've seen today, the early primaries looked very good for Bernie. I know Drake University was another moment that also looked very strong for Bernie Sanders. People are really out there and they're making a difference. They're out there talking in their community. They're building this movement, and that's exactly the kind of politics and strategy that we need to be doing. Because look, it's not going to come from up high. The only way Bernie Sanders will become the next president of the United States is if all of us, we the people, come out and make that happen. It's not going to happen if you just sit on your butt, tweeting, being online is great because that brings a lot of people in the movement. But fundamentally, we need to be building those communities and those coalitions with people around us. We need to be talking to people and express our excitement and why we support Bernie Sanders, because that's exactly how we win. So yeah, so I mean, so just think about the way that the media has been treating, this campaign. I mean, I'm sure we all saw Chris Matthews freak out this week. It's been very fun to watch because you see these people who have just been so wrong about everything, just so fundamentally wrong. They thought that what we needed to do in 2016 was put up a kind of milquetoast centrist campaign, and that was what was going to beat Donald Trump. And they were so spectacularly wrong. It's been amazing to me to see them try to return to that same script. Fundamentally, that is not how you're going to change politics in this country. It's not going to work. And they're just trying to scare people. I mean, that's what it is. They're trying to scare people. They say, you might want this, but if what you want to happen happens, you're going to lose. Well, they've been shown time and time again that that's not how, that is not the script of, we're living in radical times. We are living in the crumble of American empire, of American capitalism, of this global economic system. And we're not going to be able to revive that with the centrism that brought us into this mess in the first place. And the big problem is that if the Democratic Party stands in the way of this movement, they are just emboldening the far right. And I think we need to continue to hit that point that we are facing an existential crisis. We need to take bold action, and bold action is popular. The people who are standing in our way have been wrong about everything, and we need to get rid of them. We absolutely, we need to get these people out of power. So, here's the thing. It's looking really good for Bernie Sanders tonight. The caucus system is not everybody's favorite system, but it does give us, an opportunity to be able to lobby people, to be able to push back. I know the big worry of tonight is with this 15% threshold that we could get into a situation where Bernie Sanders comes out number one in the first ballot in a lot of these, caucuses, and then people like, the Klobuchar fans, Jesus Christ, the Klobuchar fans, the Buttigieg people, they go to Biden, right? What's looking very likely to happen is that it's going to be Sanders, Biden, and Buttigieg getting through that first ballot round. And the real question is going to be whether or not the Warren people will come to our side or if they'll go to Buttigieg or Biden. That's something I'm very worried about. Well, we should also remember, that the way these delegates work, that even if, it's very close and, Biden's able to edge out or Buttigieg is able to edge out, that we take those delegates on to New Hampshire, which is looking very, very positive for Bernie Sanders. The Bernie Sanders campaign there has been phenomenal. They have the institutions and the infrastructure there to run a phenomenal campaign, and it's been working. So, we absolutely, need to keep this momentum happening and move on to the next, to the next stage. So tonight, hopefully, we have a lot to celebrate at the end of the evening, but the work doesn't end. These next 5 weeks are really going to determine the future of the next 4 years. Hopefully, our lifetime of politics in the United States. So let's see. So we should be starting to get some information about how the caucuses are going on. It seems that there's high turnout. High turnout is phenomenal for Bernie Sanders because, most people don't vote. A lot of people don't show up for these things. And the people who come out, the new people who are being engaged by the Bernie Sanders movement, are really changing the game. We're seeing when Bernie Sanders and radicals are running, you see higher turnout because people do desperately want change. So the fact that we've seen so much, the fact that we've seen so many people showing up for this first caucus is a very good sign for Bernie Sanders. I also would mention that, Latino voters in Iowa lean very much to Bernie Sanders. And from what I've been seeing, from folks, like Chuck, who's a great Bernie Sanders, surrogate, that the lines for the Spanish-speaking caucuses are very long, and a lot of people are showing up. So that's another thing that's very exciting for Bernie Sanders. Young people are out. These are the kind of people who are going to, this is our coalition, is, working class people, people of color, people who have been left out of the political process for so long. So to see the fact that so many people are coming out, that looks very good for Bernie Sanders. I'll just say, in New Hampshire, Sanders is leading. The last poll I saw, he was at 31%, ahead of Joe Biden, who's at 24%. So New Hampshire looks like it's going to be very good for Bernie Sanders. The big fear for a long time has been how Bernie does in South Carolina. And in South Carolina, Bernie Sanders has cut into this Joe Biden lead. I remember when the earlier polling was coming out, Joe Biden was up by 31 points. And obviously, Joe Biden is somebody who, the more that he's out there, the less people like him, the more it seems that he doesn't really seem like he's with it. He's attacking voters, shaming people, and it's not been very popular. So Bernie Sanders has cut down that Joe Biden lead to 5%. And that's definitely a margin that we can work with and win. So that's a very exciting thing. So we get a strong start in Iowa. We do well in New Hampshire. The opportunities are looking very good for us and looking very much in our favor. So here's some things that I also wanted to add is that, one, we have to break through what Mark Fisher called capitalist realism, which is this idea that nothing is possible, that the end of the world seems more likely than any kind of socialist or liberation-based politics. And what we've been seeing is that this capitalist realism that's just been such a weight around our necks for so long, for so many people, that's starting to break. And we need to continue to show people that this is possible, that not only are these ideas better, but they can win. And they're very popular. I think, we were talking on the show on Friday about these really interesting polls, and that came out from Data for Progress, where they're putting Bernie Sanders up, and the socialist label didn't hurt him. The socialist label is not the negative that these people like Claire McCaskill and the MSNBC pundits have been saying. People don't seem fazed by that. You know what they don't like is when Bernie Sanders is described as a Democrat, because a lot of people realize that the Democratic Party, that they've, especially people who are from communities that traditionally vote Democrat, they've seen, what have they got for it? Their wages have remained stagnant, housing costs have risen, and healthcare has become more and more unaffordable. We live in a country right now where getting sick, right? Where getting sick can not only be devastating to you as an individual, but can completely bankrupt your family. That's not a moral society. And people realize that. And that's why this Bernie Sanders movement has been so successful. It's changing the way that we think about that. But it's not just limited to healthcare. When we talk to people, it's like, do you think that people who work 40 hours a week should be living in poverty? People say, well, no, that's absolutely absurd. There's no reason that capitalists, the people, the bosses, should be able to take in as much profit as they have over the past 20 years. And especially after this recovery, we saw people's faith in this economic system be completely shaked in the, I'll get to these super chats in 1 second. We've seen people's faith in this system be absolutely shaken. And then what happened in the response to the financial crisis? All the profits went to the 1%. The stock market boomed. The recovery has been very good for capitalists. It has been good for working people. And saying, we're not going to do politics for the 1%. We're going to do politics for everyday people, for working class Americans. That resonates with people. And, that's what Trump tried to do in 2016. It's obviously a lie. But Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton was not a favorable matchup, because Hillary Clinton was more of the same, and people are done with more of the same. Thank you so much, Susie. This is an exciting moment. I cannot express how thrilled I am right now that this is happening. And Ambrose, yeah, next time I'll wear my Stetson. I don't get to wear my Stetson that much in New York City, but it's always a big hit when I do. But yeah, so we're seeing this moment where people are very, passionate, and lots happening. And we're already seeing the DNC try to come against Bernie Sanders. So let's think about this for a second, and the context of what this Michael Bloomberg candidacy shows for how the Democratic Party wants to operate. Michael Bloomberg, who the hell wants Michael Bloomberg to be president? That is not somebody who has an organic constituency. He is one of their last ditch efforts, that if somebody just has enough money that he can just put in the same boring ads, that's going to win the candidacy. One, that's not going to work. If the 2020 election is between New York billionaire asshole Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump, the future of this country is very, very bleak. But the Democratic Party is more worried about maintaining their favorability with the rich, maintaining their favorability with these donors who have propped up and created all these big careers for people in Washington, D.C. and a lot of these think tanks than they are about actually winning elections. So the fact that the DNC is even considering changing the rules of the debates that kept out so many candidates who are much more viable than Michael Bloomberg, in my opinion, just shows you that the orientation of the Democratic Party is not one that's serious about winning, and it's not one that's serious about fighting for working class people. So, we need to be hitting Bloomberg as much as possible, really pointing out the unfairness of this system, that somebody like Michael Bloomberg, who has no reason to be running for president at all, is just able to buy himself an election, buy himself a seat at the table. That's fundamentally unfair. We need to change the campaign finance system. Bernie Sanders broke the campaign finance system that worked to elect the rich, worked for the interest of the super wealthy who were just able to buy candidates, because he came directly to the people. And that's why Bernie Sanders has really thrown a lot of these folks for a loop, because they think that, they thought that if they have the money, that they have the power. And we're showing them that that's not the case, that we can get together and challenge the system. So that's been something that's been, phenomenal. And now we're seeing them try to change the system again to empower the rich. So we really need to be hitting that as much as possible, that those people have no business running in the Democratic Party. They have no business changing the rules for the party. And we're done with them. But that's the difficulty of what this, so we have a lot to be excited about. And we also need to realize what we're up against. We're up against a party that's not our party. The Democratic Party is controlled by a few wealthy elites, by people who don't want to change society that much. They just don't like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is vulgar, or whatever, right? Their life is not threatened like people who have the fear of getting sick or getting a diagnosis from a doctor that means that they're going to not be able to survive anymore because they don't have access to healthcare, or even people who have insurance realizing that their insurance companies won't cover them, right? The people who control the Democratic Party don't care about that. And we need to understand that the Democratic Party as an institution has been working against our activist and grassroots movement, and it's been doing it for a generation now. So we need to understand that the Democratic Party fundamentally is something that is going to, line up against us. And that's sort of the contradiction of the moment, because the Democratic Party is what controls the ballot lines. They control access to the left-wing vote in this country for the most part, because a lot of third-party candidates, they don't have viable paths to victory. So in the short term, we have to be able to work within the Democratic Party to be able to build as much power as possible, but also recognizing that we're standing a little bit outside of that organization, and we're building something different, because we don't want to become the Democratic Party. We want to take over that institution. So as we continue to build, it's important to also make sure that we're building in ways that stand outside the party. So being a member of your local DSA is something you can definitely do, and I highly suggest doing. Because it brings you together with a lot of like-minded people. We can strategize together, work together, and we can do this in a way that's separate from the Democratic Party's, institution, because the Democratic Party is always going to try to prevent these movements from happening, and is always going to work against people like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar, right? So absolutely join your DSA organization and, continue this fight. And so, the socialist label is not a hurdle, actually, as much as people have been saying that it is, for us to get over. And I think it's very important, too, to maintain, you continue to call yourself a socialist, continue to remind people that if you like Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and maybe you should think about other socialist organizations. We can't limit ourselves to just this campaign and an individual, and Bernie Sanders recognizes that. That's why the slogan, "Not Me, Us," is such a phenomenal slogan, because we're bringing people together to change this country and to change the world, right? And, continuing to do that work in that way puts us in a better position for future movements, because we're not limited to the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party, as much work as we're trying to do within the party and trying to change the base and the power structure of it, there's such a stronghold of power that still remains with the elites in this country that we're going to have to, we have to reckon with, and we have to deal with that. And the only way we're going to be able to stand up against them is if we have our own external power bases. And we're doing that, but we need to continue to do that. So highly suggest, making sure that they're as involved as possible with organizations like the DSA. Try to do tenant union organizing. I think housing is an issue that we really can be working on. Everybody realizes it doesn't matter where you live in this country. You can't afford to live or rent in pretty much any place in the United States. Cities like Houston are becoming unaffordable. Cities like New York City have been unaffordable for a very long time. But the smaller cities too, the rents just continue to go up, and we don't see the wage gains to make up that difference. So I think talking about how, in addition to healthcare, is something that we can do, and talking about the fact that all the gains of this economic recovery that we've seen since the economic crisis have gone to the people at the top, and we need to fundamentally shift that. Right? We need to fundamentally shift that, and we can do that by coming together and building organizations that stand outside of these traditional power bases, because people don't trust the Democratic Party. I'll just say, I'm from the South. I'm from Texas. I'm from Austin. I also lived in South Carolina for a very long time. Cities like Austin have, there's a lot of people who like the Democratic Party there, but you talk to most folks, they're most like normal people, not weirdos. The most normal people aren't really passionate about the Democratic Party, because it's very difficult to say what the Democratic Party is other than an opposition to Republicans. And Republicans are so unpopular and so clearly evil and wicked that a lot of people, don't want to be a part of that. But the Democratic Party, just being the opposition party, and a half-assed opposition party at that, has not been able to galvanize people in the same way as like this Bernie Sanders movement. And we need to continue that growth and saying like, we're doing something different. We aren't looking to build out of, what the Democratic Party was. We're trying to change that fundamentally, and we're trying to build a movement that's independent. Thank you so much, Linik. I wasn't saying that right. I love Los Angeles. We had a great live show there. It was a really great meeting all the folks there. It's a really exciting city, and a lot of important radical movements are going on there. So that's another great city where so much is happening. Again, if you're in Texas, the DSA branches there are really doing phenomenal work, I have to say. I'm always like so excited when I see what they're able to do in a state that people think is unfavorable. But look, Bernie Sanders is looking like he could beat Donald Trump in Texas. Do you think about how much, look, if the Democratic Party was serious about winning, they would see the fact that Bernie Sanders is going to be able to stand up against Donald Trump in Texas, right? And they would be throwing all of their weight behind him, because that is how you will fundamentally shift the Electoral College. That's how you will fundamentally shift this country. And you can destroy one of the right wing's most important power bases, which is their control of the suburban Texas vote that flipped the state to Republican control in the 90s, right? If the Democratic Party was serious about winning, they would say, wait a second, why is it that these left-wing candidates are so viable and looking good in a state that we've written off for a very long time? But they're not serious about it. So we have to force them to be serious about that. And that's exactly, the kind of bold strategy that we need. When Bernie Sanders ran, people thought Medicare for all was impossible. When Bernie Sanders ran, people thought that running on a left-wing economic populist message was not viable. When Bernie Sanders first announced his candidacy, people thought it was a fringe candidacy and a lunatic movement. Well, we've shown that they're absolutely wrong. And we need to be as bold as Bernie Sanders was in 2015, when that campaign made the decision that they are able to win in this country. We do not need to continue to believe the lies that we've been fed for a long time by the media. And you see how out of touch all these pundits are on CNN and MSNBC. Because they've been taught something. They're, when you talk about like economists, right? Like right-wing economists, trickle-down economists, supply siders, and you sit there and you're like, these people are living in a fantasy world, and all of the history of modern capitalism proves them wrong. We're seeing the same thing when it comes to political commentary and political strategy. The people who've been in control of those systems are so wrong, and they're very confused. And we should treat them in the same way when people say, well, the only way to win in America is by putting up a moderate. because people in this country are center right, and that's the only way that we're going to win. And you say, well, what happened when the Democratic Party really made this shift to the center? The Democratic Party lost all of its bases across the United States. State houses flipped to Republican, and then the states that maintained Democrat control, they didn't do anything, and people lost trust in that party and in those politicians. So these people have been proven wrong over and over and over again. And it's clear that they're not going to pay attention to the facts. They're not going to pay attention to what's happening in this country, right? And we should ignore them. And that's why it's important that, y'all are able to support us in the work that we're doing and other progressive and independent media, because we're coming directly to people and we're saying, look, all these people are absolutely living on a different planet. And they are. These people live in small gated communities. They take an Uber to their job. They don't spend time with average people, right? And they have no connection at all with what's going on in this country and the real pain and suffering that's been happening. And that's why Bernie Sanders movement has tapped into this energy, because people are fed up and they do want some change. And, that is something, it's an advantage for us, and it's to their disadvantage that they can't see it. Oh, wow. Benjamin Cherney, Jason Johnson said, Bloomberg isn't an oligarch, even though he's wealthier than the bottom 110 countries. Yes. I mean, that's the thing, is Michael Bloomberg represents everything that's wrong with America, and specifically, capitalism. That somebody has been able to take so much wealth for themselves while people are struggling to get by, when people haven't seen a wage increase in decades. Somebody like Michael Bloomberg is able to have more wealth than literal countries. I mean, that's just such a ridiculous idea to even wrap your head around. Obviously, Michael Bloomberg is an oligarch. Michael Bloomberg is our enemy, and we need to defeat him. And, this kind of idea that people are going to be able to rally behind Bloomberg is ludicrous, and it's not going to happen. Mark, our opponents are the Democrats, not the Republicans. Trump is the foe for the corporatists, for the corporatistas prefer Trump. The Republicans are definitely our enemy. They're just very clear about their enemy. People in the liberal establishment and the Democratic Party establishment, they're standing against the movement, and in that way, they absolutely are our enemy. The Democrats have pushed forward some of the worst policies in American history. They betray the working class, and they are just as much a part of the American oligarchy as the Republicans. They're just a little bit nicer about it, and they're more subtle in the ways that they do it. So we have to fight this dual fight, right? Which is we need to confront the far right. We need to beat the far right. There's no doubt about that. But we also need to beat this party that's been able to. The Democratic Party functions in the American democratic system, right, as a catch against any kind of radical left-wing movement in this country. Because people who don't want to vote for the right-wing party, they vote for the Democrats. But because the Democrats fundamentally are a center-right party, right, if not an outright right-wing party for the most part, the Democratic Party is something that's preventing radical movements from coming into power. So yes, they are an opposition force to us. And that's why we're changing the party. And that's why we're waging that fight directly, like we're doing right now in Iowa. Eric Griscom, Dr. Eric from Jers, keep up the strong work. Did you see American College of Physicians are behind Medicare for all? Largest nurses union did so too. Unrealistic narratives should be put to bed. Eric, I think you're absolutely right. And, if you talk to a lot of doctors and nurses, people on the front lines, there's a reason nurses support Bernie Sanders, because they are at the front lines of the horror of our healthcare system. They see people all the time. Think about this. They see people all the time who need help, who need medical care. And they realize that by taking care of these people, those people's financial lives are going to be ruined. So it makes perfect sense to me that doctors and nurses are coming out in support of policies like Medicare for all, because they see how fundamentally flawed the American system is. And it doesn't work better than other systems of socialized medicine. In fact, socialized medicine works significantly better than these, because so much time in our system is spent hounding people, dealing with insurance companies. So much of the work of hospitals is trying to deal with insurance companies and getting payments for the work that they're doing. If we had a simplified system where people are being taken care of, then doctors and hospitals and these organizations were able to get paid in a simple way, the American medical system will become much more efficient, and it won't be as cruel as it is. And these people who are on the front lines constantly, I have friends, who are doctors and nurses, and they say, that's one thing that's so devastating is to see, what this system does to people's lives. If you're a doctor or nurse, what do you want to do? You want to help people. You want to heal people. You don't want to see that work being used to financially ruin people. So we are, so that's definitely a huge opportunity. And I think doing that kind of direct work and, organizing doctors and nurses and people in the medical profession directly to come out and speak about their experience is something that the Bernie Sanders campaign has done very well. So I'm seeing, some stuff coming in. People are saying in the chat that Biden is underperforming. That's phenomenal. It looks like, wow. So, in a couple of these districts, Joe Biden doesn't even look like he'll be viable, which means that he didn't even get 15% of the 15% of the people out there caucusing. So in Johnston County, I believe, Joe Biden doesn't look like he'll be viable. He would need 54 supporters to reach 15%, and Biden only appears to have less than 40. That's awesome. And that's one thing, the caucus system, I think we all understand the issues with it, specifically how it limits people who are differently abled from being able to participate, specifically how it limits people who are having to work from being able to participate as easily as, states that, for example, have like early voting. But one thing that is nice about the caucus system is literally you have to go stand in a corner. And if you want to be a Biden supporter and you want to support the status quo, all this nonsense, right? Then you have to sit there and see the looks from everybody else. And it looks better for Bernie Sanders because of that, because people want to be a part of a movement that has this energy behind it. So, I think a couple of things from what I've been reading about voters in Iowa that we need to confront is we really need to make sure that we're telling people to vote for what they want. Say, do you want Medicare for all? Do you want the rich to pay more in taxes? Because they absolutely should. Do you want a Green New Deal? Do you want to live in a country that's not engaged in endless war? Do you want to end this horrific system of, police brutality against Black people, a criminal justice system that's meant to disenfranchise people and put people into prison? You need to stand with this Bernie Sanders movement. Sometimes people, when they're voting, they have this feeling of like responsibility that like, well, I might not vote for who I want. I'm going to vote for who's, the most electable. And obviously we can make the arguments about why Bernie Sanders is the most electable because he is, right? But these people are being fed narratives by the mainstream media that say that somebody like Bernie Sanders isn't electable. One, we're going to show them tonight that Bernie Sanders absolutely is electable. And two, we need to start pushing back and saying, we need to stand up and say, are you tired of the way that the world's been run? Are you tired of the system, this political system that we have in the United States? Then you need to have the bravery to stand up for what you believe in. And it's easier to do that when you see people, it's easier to do that in numbers, right? And making sure that people realize that there's so much Bernie Sanders support out there is important. So literally, it can be as simple as wearing your Bernie Sanders t-shirt, your bumper stickers, showing that there's support in the community for Bernie Sanders. As I was talking about specifically states like, Texas and South Carolina, where people think of Bernie Sanders might be too radical, which is not true, right? Going out, if you're living in states like that, going out there and being an outspoken supportive Bernie Sanders is huge, because when people see that, there's support for Bernie Sanders, they're going to be a lot more comfortable voting their heart and their beliefs rather than this kind of, three-dimensional chess thing. It's like, well, I don't like Buttigieg, but I think he's gonna, be able to pull this kind of mythical centrist voter who wants a completely vapid politician who's just going to give us pep talks, right? We can dissuade that by saying, like, look, there's already the Bernie Sanders support isn't there, and you can be a part of this movement, and you don't have to sacrifice your vote by voting for something that you don't want. You can vote for something that you want. It's looking really good for Bernie Sanders right now. It's still early. All this stuff is super preliminary. But from what I'm seeing right now, it looks like turnout is really high. It's looking like the Bernie Sanders people are doing a very good job of being able to convince people to stand with them. And it looks like Joe Biden is not having the enthusiasm that a lot of people thought that he would. I mean, Joe Biden, in a lot of ways, was like what Hillary Clinton was in 2016. It's just like the default, right? It's like, well, if you want to, just like continue the status quo or whatever, we'll support him. But as people start to realize what the status quo actually represents, right? Higher medical bills, failure to change this system, the continuing of economic policies that have devastated the poor for the benefit of the rich, it becomes less and less exciting. So I think that, we have a huge opportunity ahead of us. I think that this tonight's looking really good. I think we have the enthusiasm. And I mean, Jesus Christ, this campaign has been so beautiful. And I just want to take a second to thank all of y'all. Being able to meet all these folks that I probably wouldn't have had the experience of meeting if it wasn't for the Bernie campaign and the Democratic Socialist Movement. It's been a really beautiful thing. We need to continue this fight and continue moving, right? We can't ever sit down and say, well, we're doing well right now, so that's it. No, we need to continue hitting hard. These next 5 weeks, we have all this time where we could talk about politics, but it's very rare in the American system where people feel like they have an avenue for action. And we have that right now. We need to continue that momentum. And in the long term, if Bernie Sanders does get elected, we're going to have to continue that work as well, because the Bernie Sanders campaign, the Bernie Sanders movement is not going to be able to be active if we don't have the people who are mobilized. We have the mobilization, and we need to build these structures that are able to keep people in the movement outside of just voting. Because voting is great, but that's only part of what we're doing. So political education is really important, making sure that you're doing. So look, if you're talking to your friends about Bernie Sanders and you're thinking that you're having a lot of positivity and positive response from them, be sure to not only push for Bernie Sanders, say, you should start reading, check out this Jackman article, check out TMBS, check out these other left-wing independent podcasts and media that are going to give you the tools to not only have information about this election, but also do the kind of work of political education and realizing what these political structures in the United States are set up to do. Because I like to talk about my background's in philosophy. I really like Gramsci's work a lot, and we need to realize that we're living in an era of capitalist hegemony, right? Where people think that the capitalist system that we've come into, that we were born into, is the natural order of things, when obviously it's not. You remember how much violence is imposed to keep capitalism in place. The police, fundamentally, their job is to uphold property rights and to fight for rich people. They're not standing up for working class people. Obviously, their war against people of color and poor people is a huge part of their role in the capitalist state to enact violence. Capitalism is a system that fundamentally is predicated on violence and disenfranchisement of people, and making sure that people realize that these institutions aren't natural. They're actually something that's very much imposed on us. That's the second level work that we have to do. We need to, one, say there's more that's possible than what you thought. And then two, the way that things are, it's not the natural order. We need to get rid of these ideas that capitalism is a rational economic system. I mean, I talked about this on my gem on Friday. But, there's all this freaking out going on with the stock market, right? That there's going to be massive sell-offs if Bernie Sanders gets elected or if it looks like he's going to do well, right? Remind people that that's not an economic fact. That's actually rich people making a decision with money to punish the stock market, right? To pull their money out of it, makes the prices go down. That makes it look like there's a big problem. You're making a decision to do that. It's not an economic fact. It's a political decision by the wealthy, and trying to get rid of these ideas of rationality of the market, that it's just some beast or some creature that has its own feelings, rather than being the actions of a bunch of individuals, and particularly when you talk about the stock market, individual rich people. We need to make sure that people are realizing that these systems are very much human and are very much put onto us. Frantz Fanon, who's a writer you should really check out. He was a radical post-colonial socialist fighter. He's from Martinique. Originally, he was a psychoanalyst and radical, and was very influential in the Algerian Revolution, which was one of the great anti-colonial revolutions of all time. He has a line in The Wretched of the Earth, which is one of his major political works, where he talks about, sometimes it's easier in these colonial systems when you're literally being occupied to see the oppression at work, right? Because you see the flag of France, or you see the flag of the colonial army, and you realize that's not us, right? Versus, advanced capitalist systems like the United States, where there's so much ideological apparatus. So he uses this example, juxtaposing the flag of the occupying army in Algeria with a factory worker in the U.S. who spends 50 years toiling for the benefit of somebody else, and then at the end of their life, they give them a watch, right? And how it's sometimes harder for people to realize the oppression that's going on underneath the surface there because it's not as apparent. So making sure that we're doing the work of making sure that people recognize that oppression is very important. Thanks so much, Caucus, Nebraska. Really appreciate the super chat. And thanks everyone for your support. The financial support that we get from this community is so huge because it really allows us to do as much coverage. For people who've been following the show for the past couple of years, I'm sure that you can realize the amount that we're able to do within TMBS has grown exponentially. We've been able to bring in so many great people because of this support, and we're trying to continue to grow. We're not just sit on our butts as we continue to get more and more people involved with this project. We want to continue to expand, as I was saying earlier, and really build a platform for the socialist movement and the international movement, because as we've been seeing over the past few years, it's more and more important that we have those connections, that we have connections with people in Bolivia, so that it's not when a coup, for example, there happens, we're not rushing, sprinting to try to build the connections and the communities that are necessary to organize, anti-coup demonstrations in the United States and build those solidarity networks. We want to start building those so that we're able to constantly fight, because capital is very much united against us around the world. And having the ability to build the communities that we need in the United States, in Mexico, across Europe and Asia, the whole world, obviously. That's fundamentally, what we need to be doing, and it's very exciting to be a part of that, and y'all are part of it too. So many great people are able to meet as part of this, this podcast and this show, and I think that's been really lovely. So I'm gonna head out in a couple minutes because I'm just gonna watch the results like the rest of y'all. I think it's gonna take a while to see how. I think tonight's going to be a little bit of a long night from what I've been seeing. This app that they have in Iowa apparently has a lot of issues. So I think it's going to take a long time for, the verified results to come in. So, I'll be sitting there watching like the rest of y'all. But, in the last couple of minutes, I just really want to hit these points, is that we're building a counter-hegemonic movement. We're building a movement that says that the way that the cruelty of the world is not natural, the cruelty of being unable to survive, the way that it's impossible to live, to afford food, healthcare, housing, that's not the way that the world needs to be, and we can actually change that. So we can change that with policies like Medicare for All, but also these really exciting opportunities that we have with the Green New Deal and the jobs guarantee to really be able to revitalize communities and say, these communities that have lost so much work and so many jobs, we can actually plan to build, we have the people, we have the resources, we have the ability to take care of everybody in this country, and we have the ability to continue to grow. And to create more economic opportunity for people. But one, we need to take back control of the money system. We need to take money away from the rich people who are just using it for their own benefit, and we need to bring that to the people, right? And we can do that democratically. We can do that through planning things like with the jobs guarantee and the Green New Deal. We can completely revitalize our society and green our economy while creating lots of jobs and opportunity for people, and also jobs that aren't just, physical manual labor, like, creating cultural centers where people have, it's so hard. I deal with this a lot in where I'm living now in New York. It's where could I go and spend time out in public, outside of my apartment where I don't have to spend money? I mean, you have the library, and the library systems are a great example. But you see how overworked the library system is, because the library system is probably one of the only free places that you can go in this city. And we want to be able to build more public spaces, more areas, and more, cultural enrichment and community spaces for people. And that can be a part of the Green New Deal. We can do arts, music, and cultural centers, and have people in history, and have people employed doing that kind of work. We can also, if we're able to take control of our economy away from the rich and away from the bosses, we can do the important work and the exciting work of working less. I mean, imagine that. Imagine not having to work 40 hours a week plus. Most people are working more than that. Having, proper weekends and space to thrive as an individual and as a person. That's not just limited to toiling for the benefit of a rich person. We have like this really exciting vision, and that's something that we have to be hitting. That we're not just fighting against things that we hate. We're fighting for things that we want. We're fighting for things that are beautiful. We're fighting for an incredible and beautiful world. Something that at sometimes in my life I didn't think is possible, but more and more and more, I am starting to believe that these things really are possible. I'll just answer this because I saw Dave L asked, "Is that a banjo?" Yeah, I like I play banjo and I play guitar. I really like country music and all music obviously too, but I really like country music and folk music. So I've been playing for a long time. Maybe one day we'll incorporate the banjo out there for sure. But yeah, y'all, thank you so much for hanging out with me for this time. I think that tonight's going to be very good. I hope that we're able to celebrate. And regardless, we're going to wake up tomorrow and we're going to continue this fight because it's something that's continuing. It's something that we're building, and we have more and more opportunity each month. Each month we're getting stronger. Each day we're getting stronger. And this community is not something that's going to go away. We're woke. People are woke, have been woken up by this by the financial crisis, where we were in panic and we didn't know what to do, right? And then we had Occupy, which is a very exciting thing. I cut my teeth in Occupy. And that was very important for my trajectory of becoming a socialist, was being in Occupy and being a part of a community too. And I really keep on wanting, I know I've hit that a lot, but it's really important to build as much community as possible. But at the same time, Occupy was great, but we didn't know what to do. We had all the people, and there was sort of like that confusion of like, Zizek has this line. It's like, what if you had a protest and everybody came, right? That was sort of the Occupy moment. It's like we had the people, but there was sort of some confusion and difficulty of figuring out what to do next. Well, now we have an avenue for what we can do, and that we need to continue to take advantage of that excitement and momentum and continue pushing. So build community. Fight for Bernie Sanders. Make sure that people in your community realize that you support Bernie Sanders, because as I said, people are more likely to stand up for themselves and stand up for what they want if they see that there's people out there doing it. Be sure to not only be pushing for Bernie Sanders, but also to be pushing to make people realize that capitalism, realism, that these systems aren't natural, that they're imposed and they're violently imposed on us. And then also push back against, say that like we're not just fighting against things that we don't like. We're fighting for something that we believe in. And we have probably the most exciting and beautiful message out there for what's possible. We're going to, for sure, change this society and change this country. I'm really excited. My friends, in the UK are very excited and positive about this campaign. I feel the energy. Thank you all so much. And like, let's do this. Hopefully we're celebrating tonight. We're going to do a show on Wednesday, I believe, and then I think we're going to get back to the normal schedule. If you haven't already, we have our show in Brooklyn coming up this Friday. It's going to be an amazing show, monster show, a lot of great guests. So if you're in the area and you haven't got your tickets, definitely grab them. It's at the Bell House. And then I'm coming back home to Austin, Texas, and we're going to have Abby Martin and Anna Kasparian April 3rd in Austin. So if you're in Texas, if you're in Austin, definitely come out. I'm so excited. I've been talking to Matt and Michael a lot about all the barbecue places and fun things we're going to do in the city. And I can't wait to be able to meet all of you in person. So let's do this. Solidarity forever. Not me, us. Bernie Sanders all the way. Let's do this. All right. Talk to y'all later.